The Sword and the Olive Branch, generated by StoryWave.ai, March 2024. Please tap that like button, share, and subscribe for more. Chapter 1. The Call of Faith. In the heart of Granada, where the scent of orange blossoms mingled with the gentle murmur of fountains, there lived a young warrior named Yahya ibn Ibrahim. His home was a sanctuary of peace amidst a land rich with history and tradition. The ancient Al-Baykan quarter, with its cobblestone streets and whitewashed houses, alive with the spirit of Ramadan. The first light of dawn had barely touched the sky when Yahya, known among his kin as the Faithful, rose to the soft call of the muezzin. His deep hazel eyes reflected a day of piety and patience ahead, and as he washed in the cool stillness of morning, he recited Quranic verses that whispered of strength and perseverance. Yahya joined his family to partake in the suhoor, the pre-dawn meal before the day of fasting began. His father, a man of quiet dignity, broke the silence with news that had been spreading like a low, ominous wind across the lands. "Whispers from the east speak of Alaric the Merciless," he said, his voice steady but tinged with concern, "a warlord whose shadow looms over the neighboring valleys." Around the table, Yahya's siblings exchanged uneasy glances. The Faithful's younger sister, with her curious eyes, spoke up. "What does he seek, this Alaric?" "He seeks to conquer, to claim what is not his, to spread fear," his father replied, breaking bread with strong, weathered hands. Yahya felt a surge within him, a call that transcended the tranquility of his home. It was a call to protect, to stand firm in the face of encroaching darkness. Yet he remained silent, for now was a time to listen, to understand the ripples of unrest that were only just beginning to touch their lives. The family continued their meal, the air filled with the aromas of cumin and coriander, the sweetness of dates, and the rich warmth of freshly baked bread. Yahya's mother, a woman of grace and sturdiness, poured mint tea, its steam carrying the essence of Ramadan's blessings. "We must have faith," she said softly, her words a gentle reminder of the strength they all shared. Faith in Allah, faith in each other, and faith that together we can face any adversity. As the sun climbed higher, casting its golden light upon the city's ancient walls, the day unfolded with the rhythm of prayer and reflection. But the news of Alaric's advances hung over Yahya like an unseen storm cloud, stirring within him a decisiveness that was both old and new. Evening came, and the family gathered once more, this time to break their fast. The iftar was a spread of vibrant dishes, each a history to the loving hands that prepared them. They recited the Maghrib prayer together, a chorus of devotion that seemed to fortify the very walls of their home. As they ate, Yahya's uncle, a traveler and a scholar, shared tales of his journeys, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "I have seen the remnants of Alaric's path," he said, his olive-green eyes dark with the memory. "Towns abandoned, fields scorched, hearts filled with despair." Yahya listened, his own heart beating a drum of wariness. "And the armies? What of the Caliph's soldiers?" he asked, his voice strong and commanding despite the unease that gripped him. His uncle shook his head, scattered, unprepared for the ferocity of Alaric's forces. "It is as if he wields not merely the sword, but a force most sinister." The family fell into a contemplative silence, each lost in their thoughts as they considered the implications of such a foe. Yahya felt the lion within him stir, a spirit animal that mirrored his courage and the fierce determination that lay beneath his athletic build. Later, as the stars began to pepper the sky, Yahya stood on the terrace, gazing out over the city that was both his heart and his charge. The tattoo of an olive branch on his right forearm served as a reminder of the peace he cherished and the battle he may soon have to fight. Granada was a land of contrasts, where the sword and the olive branch had long coexisted. Now, with the threat of Alaric looming like a specter on the horizon, Yahya knew that the time would come when he must draw upon the strength of his faith, his family, and his community. For in the shadows of great evil, it was the call of faith that would summon him to a destiny greater than he had ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Mentor's Wisdom. Granada's morning sun cast a golden hue over the Al-Baykan, bathing its labyrinthine alleyways in a warm, comforting light. Yahya, with an olive branch inked upon his forearm, set out to meet the man who would shape the destiny awaiting him. Zayd al-Maghribi was more than an imam. He He was a flare of knowledge, his wisdom as sturdy as the ancient walls that cradled the city. Upon reaching the mosque, the young warrior found Zayd in the courtyard, surrounded by the soft murmur of flowing water from an ornate fountain. His salt and pepper hair reflected his years, and his full beard was an evidence to his devotion. "Peace be upon you, Yahya." "I have been expecting you," Zayd greeted, his olive-green eyes meeting Yahya's with a gentle firmness. "And upon you, peace," Yahya replied, his voice a mix of reverence and uncertainty. "You spoke of a test, one that lingers on the horizon. I feel a weight upon my shoulders, a burden I am yet to understand." Zayd motioned for Yahya to sit beside him on the intricately woven prayer mat. "The weight you feel is the mantle of responsibility," Zayd began. "It is a heavy cloak to wear, but remember, the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire." The young warrior listened intently as Zayd recounted tales of ancient heroes who stood against the tides of darkness, their courage unwavering, their patience unyielding. With each story, Yahya's understanding deepened, the roots of his faith spreading like the branches of the olive trees that graced Granada's hills. As the day pressed on, the mosque's shaded halls echoed with the clashing of wooden swords. Yahya trained under Zayd's watchful eye, each strike, each block, a dance between mentor and student. "Why does my heart waver, Zayd?" Yahya asked, pausing to catch his breath. "I can wield a sword, recite the surahs, but doubt lingers like a shadow." "Even the mightiest warrior carries doubt," Zayd replied, his voice calm as still waters. "It is a companion on the journey, a voice to be acknowledged but not to be led by. For within you lies a strength, Yahya, that is yet to be fully awakened." Yahya absorbed his mentor's words, letting them settle like the dust kicked up by their training. They spoke of the virtues of courage and patience, not as mere concepts, but as living, breathing elements of the human spirit. "When the time comes, you will rise to meet your challenge," Zayd assured him. "Just as the moon reflects the sun's light, you too will reflect the virtues instilled within you." As evening approached, they broke their fast together, the dates and water a symbol of the life and purity that sustained them. It was here, in the quiet reflection that followed their meal, that Yahya's spiritual journey began to unfurl like the petals of a desert rose. "Remember, Yahya," Zayd said, his voice a soft whisper, "the greatest battles are often fought within. Conquer yourself, and you will be ready to stand against any darkness." Under the mentor's wisdom, Yahya felt the seeds of greatness sown in the fertile soil of his soul. With each passing day, his tenacity grew stronger, and though the whispers of self-doubt still echoed in the chambers of his heart, he knew he was not alone in his journey. For in the bond between mentor and student, there was a promise of triumph over the trials to come. Chapter 3: The Warlord's Shadow. As the first light of dawn caressed the peaks of the Sierra Nevada, a chilling breeze blew through Granada, carrying with it the scent of turmoil from distant lands. The city, usually abuzz with the harmonious clatter of daily life, felt the grip of an uneasy stillness. In the bustling heart of the city, Yahya stood with his mentor Zayd outside the Grand Mosque, their eyes locked on the horizon. News had arrived with the swiftness of a desert falcon. Alaric the Merciless had laid waste to neighboring areas, and his sights were now set on Granada. "We must fortify the city." Zayd's voice carried the weight of the situation, his calm exterior belying the storm brewing within. Alaric's reputation precedes him, a man void of mercy, leaving nothing but sorrow in his wake. Yahya's gaze fell upon the faces of the townsfolk. Men were sharpening blades, women were gathering supplies, and children were helping in whatever way their small hands could manage. The unity of the city's people was a tapestry woven with threads of determination. "Should we not seek a peaceful clarity?" Yahya questioned, the thought of war a heavy stone in his stomach. "Could there not be a path that leads away from bloodshed?" "Alaric speaks not the language of peace," Zayd replied, his tone somber. "We must stand ready to protect our home, our families. Yet it is not just swords and shields that safeguard a city, but wisdom and courage." They walked through the cobbled streets, observing the preparations. Yahya's heart ached at the sight, the beauty of his home tainted with the shadow of impending conflict. The two found themselves at the city's edge where a traveler, weary and worn, shared harrowing tales of villages trampled under the warlord's heel. Homes burned, crops destroyed, and a once vibrant land now silenced. Granada is a signpost of hope, a jewel Alaric covets. The traveler spoke with a voice as cracked as the parched earth he had journeyed upon. I have seen the havoc his forces wreak, and it is a darkness that swallows all light. Yahya listened, his fists clenching at the vivid images painted by the traveler's words. The young warrior's spirit animal, the lion, roared silently within him, a call to defend against the encroaching threat. Zayd placed a hand on Yahya's shoulder, his touch a reminder of the support that surrounded him. Remember, it is not just strength of arms that wins a battle, but strength of heart. And your heart, Yahya, is as fierce as it is pure. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of fiery orange and deep purple, the city's inhabitants gathered in their homes, breaking their fast in somber reflection. Yahya sat with his family, the chatter of previous nights replaced by a collective contemplation of the days ahead. Alaric's shadow stretches far, Yahya's father said, his voice resonating with a steadfast resolve. We must stand as one, as a community united against this calamity. Yahya looked to his kin, their faces a mosaic of hope and toughness. The young warrior knew that the morrow would bring challenges the likes of which they had never faced. Late into the night, Yahya stood atop the highest tower of the Alhambra, the moon casting its silver glow over the city. He knew that the coming days would test the very fibers of his being. The choice between the sword and the olive branch weighed heavily upon him, but it was a choice he would not make alone. For now, the warlord's shadow loomed large, a monster at the gates, and Yahya, with the wisdom imparted by Zayd and the courage of his people, would face it head-on. The city of Granada, with all its splendor and history, braced itself for the storm that approached, ready to overcome the darkness that threatened its very existence. Chapter 4: The Skirmish at Dawn. Dawn's first light had not yet pierced the night's shroud, when the silent tension hanging over Granada was shattered by the distant thunder of approaching hooves. The vanguard of Alaric's horde was upon them, and the city's defenders mustered at the gates, steeling themselves for the skirmish that would soon erupt. Yahya stood among his fellow warriors, the cool metal of his sword a familiar weight in his hand. The walls of Granada, which had stood tall for centuries, now bore witness to a new generation ready to etch their courage into its stones. Today we hold the line, Yahya heard his father say, his voice steady and clear in the quiet before the storm. For our homes, for our families, we stand as one. The stillness of the moment was a canvas waiting to be painted with the actions of brave souls. Yahya exchanged nods with his comrades, each nod an unspoken oath of solidarity. The young warrior felt the lion within him awaken, ready to defend the heart of the city that pulsed with life, even as the shadow of war loomed over it. As the horizon began to blush with the first hints of dawn, the silence was broken by the furor of Alaric's forces. They emerged like specters from the mist, a wave of malice crashing against the resoluteness of Granada's sentinels. The clash of metal rang out as the two sides met, the sound echoing off the ancient walls. Yahya moved with a grace born of countless hours of training, his blade a silver arc cutting through the chill morning air. "Stay close. Watch each other's backs," shouted a seasoned warrior, his voice cutting through the clamor. Yahya heeded the call, fighting not as an individual, but as part of a greater whole. The battle raged on, the sun climbing higher, indifferent to the mortal struggles below. Yahya found himself locked in combat with a towering adversary, the man's eyes as cold as the icy peaks of distant mountains. "Your efforts are futile," the enemy growled, his sword a blur of motion. Alaric's might is inexorable. Yahya parried a fierce blow, his response resolute. "Our will is forged in faith, and in that faith we find our strength." The two danced a deadly ballet, their swords singing a song of life and death. Yahya's arm ached, but he pushed through, knowing that this was but a taste of the trials he would face. As the fight wore on, it became clear that Granada's defenders were giving ground. The sheer number of attackers threatened to overwhelm them, their dark intent pressing in from all sides. Yahya found himself back-to-back with Zayd, the wise mentor now a fierce combatant. "This is the jihad, the striving in the path of God," Zayd shouted over the din, his voice a guiding light in the chaos. "We fight not for glory, but for justice, for peace." Yahya felt the truth of Zayd's words resonate within him. Each strike, Each maneuver was a covenant to his beliefs and the unyielding spirit of his people. The defenders fought with a ferocity that matched their invaders, pushing back against the tide of malice. The skirmish at dawn would be remembered, not for the outcome, but for the bravery displayed by those who stood fast against the darkness. As the battle drew to an uncertain close, with both sides battered and weary, Yahya and his companions retreated behind the safety of Granada's walls. They had held the line, but the warlord's shadow still loomed large. Bloodied but unbowed, Yahya looked to the sky, the sun now a golden orb casting its light upon the city. The true meaning of jihad had etched itself into his soul, a commitment to stand against tyranny, to protect the innocent, and to strive for a world where the olive branch could thrive alongside the sword. Chapter 5. The Weight of Leadership. In the heart of the Al-Bayan, Yahya, with the olive branch marking his skin, found himself standing not just as a warrior, but as a signpost of hope for the people. His acts of valor had not gone unnoticed, and with that recognition came the weight of leadership, a mantle he had never asked for, but now could not refuse. In the council hall, a room of high ceilings and long draping tapestries that told the city's storied past, Yahya faced the assembled leaders of Granada. Each face was a tapestry of concern, their eyes like mirrors reflecting the ongoing struggle of their beloved city. "We must secure our alliances," asserted Hamid, a merchant with a knack for strategy. "Our victory has shown our strength, but Alaric will return, and we must be ready." Yahya nodded, his gaze moving from one council member to the next. "We will fortify our bonds with our neighbors, seek their support. Together, we are stronger," he affirmed, his words deliberate, carrying the weight of his newfound duty. The council murmured in agreement, but the air was thick with unspoken worries. Yahya could sense the complexity of the task ahead, the delicate dance of politics that was as intricate as any battle maneuver. As the meeting drew to a close, Yahya was approached by Aisha, a weaver whose fingers created beauty as easily as they spun practicality. "The people need more than walls, Yahya. They need sustenance and hope," she said, her voice the very thread of the city's heart. Yahya met her gaze, understanding the duality of his role. "We will ensure that the markets are filled, the water flows, and the children have space to laugh again," he promised, his fortitude to see Granada thrive as fierce as the lion that roared within him. Later, sitting upon the rooftop of his family's home, Yahya surveyed the city bathed in the amber glow of twilight. The silhouette of Zayd approached, the mentor's presence a comforting constant in the whirlwind of Yahya's new responsibilities. "Leadership is a path fraught with thorns," Yahya, Zayd said, settling beside him. "It challenges the soul, tests your desires against your duties." Yahya let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I feel torn, Zayd. I yearn for the simplicity of the warrior's way, yet I cannot turn away from the needs of our people." Zayd's wise eyes held a spark of understanding. "True leadership is service, Yahya. It is in serving others that we rise above ourselves." The night deepened, and the two spoke at length, their conversation a tapestry of concern and strategy, woven with the threads of experience and youth. Yahya's mind raced with plans for alliances, resource allocation, and the defense of Granada, while his heart ached with the desire for peace, a peace that seemed as distant as the stars twinkling above them. As sleep finally claimed the city and its weary defenders, Yahya lay awake, the weight of leadership pressing upon his chest. The threat of Alaric's return was a monster lurking at the edge of his thoughts, a reminder that the battle for Granada was far from over. Yet, through the inner conflicts that swirled within him, Yahya held on to the belief that with perseverance, unity, and faith, victory could be attained. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. Yahya, with the weight of leadership upon his shoulders, surveyed the bustling activity within the city's heart. Men hoisted stones to reinforce the ramparts, while women filled sacks with sand to buttress the gates. The city was a hive of urgency, every soul contributing to the common cause. In the council chamber, Yahya and Zayd pored over maps strewn across a long, oaken table. The walls of the chamber, lined with the intricate mosaics of Andalusian art, bore silent witness to their strategizing. "Time ebbs away like sand in an hourglass," Zayd remarked, his finger tracing the routes of potential reinforcements. "We must secure the aid of our allies before Alaric's shadow darkens our door once more." Yahya nodded, his mind a whirlwind of tactics and possibilities. We will send envoys to the neighboring lands. Our bonds of faith and commerce will be our call to arms. As they spoke, a messenger burst into the room, breathless and wide-eyed. Yahya, the eastern towers have spotted dust clouds on the horizon, riders bearing the standard of Alaric. The news struck like a bell of warning, reverberating through the chamber. Yahya's decisiveness hardened, and he turned to address the assembly of leaders who had gathered. Let this be the hour when we draw together, an unbreakable chain of unity. Our walls are strong, but the spirit of our people is stronger. The crowd erupted into a chorus of determined voices, the very air charged with the spirit of defiance. Yahya's words had ignited a flame that would not be quenched by fear. In the shadow of the Alhambra, Yahya found brief respite in the company of Layla, the merchant's daughter, whose wit was as sharp as the finest Toledo steel. Her presence was a balm to the turmoil that raged within him. Granada is more than stone and mortar, Layla said, her eyes reflecting the city's resolve. It is the laughter of children, the wisdom of our elders, and the love that binds us. Yahya's heart swelled with affection for the city and the woman before him. It is for all this that we stand against the tempest, he affirmed, his hand finding hers in a silent pledge of protection. As dusk fell, Yahya stood atop the highest battlement, his silhouette etched against the purpling sky. He spoke to the gathered masses below, his voice carrying on the wind. This night, we fortify not just our homes but our hearts. Together, we are the storm that Alaric cannot quell. The people of Granada raised their voices in a resounding echo, their faith a lantern that outshone the encroaching darkness. The city was alive with the pulse of unity, every man, woman, and child a thread in the tapestry of resistance. The gathering storm was upon them, the monster at their gates, but Yahya, with the wisdom of Zayd and the courage of his people, stood ready to face the maelstrom. The battle for Granada was not just for its walls and streets, but for the very soul of the city, a soul that would not be surrendered without a fight. Chapter 7. The Siege of Fortitude. The sound of the war horn pierced the morning calm, its call to arms resonating within the ramparts and the hearts of the defenders. Yahya, standing firm upon the battlements, cast his gaze over the people he had sworn to protect. His voice rose above the clamor, steadfast and resonant. This day we stand against a sea of adversaries, Yahya called out. But remember, we are the unyielding mountain, the river that carves canyons. We are Granada, and we will not falter. The warriors cheered, their spirits lifted by his words as the first wave of attackers surged forward. The battle that ensued was a tempest of steel and fire. Yahya, alongside his fellow defenders, fought with a ferocity that mirrored the lion of his spirit. Zayd, wise and resolute, stood by Yahya's side, his own sword flashing in the morning light. Each strike for our families, each parry for our future. Zayd exhorted, his voice a balefire amidst the racket of battle. The sounds of combat filled the city, the clash of swords, the thunder of siege engines, and the cries of the embattled. Yahya moved through the fray, his blade an extension of his will, each movement an instrument to his training and resolve. As the sun climbed higher, the battle raged on. A group of defenders, led by Hamid, repelled an enemy battalion, their bravery a shining example of the city's indomitable spirit. Layla, with eyes as fierce as her resolve, aided the wounded, her hands as skilled with bandages as they were with the loom. Then, amidst the turmoil, a hush fell upon the battlefield as Alaric himself appeared, his imposing figure cutting through the defenders like a scythe. His icy blue eyes locked onto Yahya, and the two leaders advanced toward each other, the fate of Granada hanging in the balance. "You fight in vain," Alaric bellowed, his voice harsh and cold as the steel of his blade. "Surrender and spare your people further suffering." Yahya's response was unwavering, his dark brown hair matted with the dust of combat. "We will never bow to tyranny. Our strength lies in our unity, our faith, and our will to endure." The duel that followed was a clash of ideals as much as arms. Yahya and Alaric matched each other blow for blow, their swords singing a deadly chorus. The young warrior's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the unshakable knowledge that this was the moment for which he had been prepared. As the battle drew to its zenith, Yahya found an opening. With a swift, decisive strike, he disarmed Alaric, the warlord's sword clattering to the ground. The invaders, seeing their leader bested, faltered in their assault. Yahya stood tall, his chest heaving, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Let this be the end of your conquest, Alaric. Leave Granada be, and return to your lands." Alaric, his pride wounded deeper than his flesh could ever be, conceded. With a nod, he signaled the retreat, and his forces withdrew like the receding tide. The defenders of Granada erupted in victorious cheers, their city saved by the unity of its people and the courage of its leaders. Yahya, with humility and pride swelling in his chest, knew that this day would be etched into the record of history. The siege of fortitude had been withstood, the monster at their gates, overcome by the indomitable spirit of Granada. Chapter 8. The Fall of Tyranny. The morning sun broke through the clouds like a signpost of hope as it shone down on the weary yet resolute city of Granada. The once vibrant streets, now scarred by the trials of war, braced for what many hoped would be the final clash in a struggle that had tested the mettle of its people. Yahya, standing before the gates of the city, felt the weight of the sword in his hand, not just a weapon, but a symbol of the courage and conviction that had carried him this far. Today he faced not just a man, but a manifestation of oppression and fear, in the form of Alaric the Merciless. The warlord stood across the dusty ground, his presence a shadow that sought to eclipse the light of all that was good and just. Alaric's icy blue gaze fixed upon Yahya, his sneer a silent challenge to the very ideals the city stood for. "You believe you can end my reign with mere words and wishes?" Alaric's voice boomed, a cold wind that sought to chill the hearts of the onlookers. Yahya's response came not in words, but in the calm readiness with which he took his stance. The Berber warrior's deep hazel eyes did not waver, for he was the embodiment of his people's sturdiness. The duel commenced with the sounding of a horn, its note lingering in the air like the promise of a new era. Steel met steel as Yahya and Alaric engaged, their blades singing a song of conflict that had echoed through the ages. Yahya's every move was a dance of precision, honed by the wisdom imparted by Zayd and the countless hours of training that had sculpted his body and spirit. Alaric's brute force met with the young warrior's agile deftness, an instrument to the power of discipline over raw might. As the duel unfolded, Yahya found himself not just fighting Alaric, but the doubts and fears that had shadowed his path. With each parry, each thrust, he was cutting through the darkness that sought to consume his homeland. "Your efforts are futile, boy," Alaric taunted, his voice a harsh growl. "You are but a single leaf against the storm." Yahya's breath came steady, his focus unbroken. "Yet it is from a single seed that a mighty tree grows," he countered, his blade flashing in the light. The two warriors were locked in their dance of destiny, a spectacle that held the city's breath in its grip. The clash of their swords was more than a duel. It was the clashing of ideals, the age-old battle between tyranny and freedom. As the midday sun reached its zenith, Yahya's opportunity came. With a deft maneuver taught by Zayd, he disarmed Alaric, the warlord's sword clattering to the parched earth. The gasp of the crowd was a wave that washed over the battlefield, carrying with it the tides of change. Alaric, now unarmed, stood before Yahya, his defeat not just physical, but symbolic. The tyrant who had sought to conquer found himself conquered, not by the sword, but by the indomitable spirit of those he had sought to oppress. With the fall of Alaric, the city of Granada erupted in cheers, the joyous sound cascading through the streets like a river of relief and triumph. Yahya, the young warrior who had risen to the call of faith and duty, had not just defended his city. He had liberated it from the grip of tyranny. The battle was over, but the legacy of this day would live on in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. The fall of tyranny was not just the end of Alaric's reign of terror, it was the dawn of a new chapter for Granada, one where the sword and the olive branch could finally rest side by side in peace. Chapter 9. The Olive Branch. In the heart of the Albaik Inn, beneath the intricate arches of a courtyard, Yahya found Zayd, whose presence had been like a guiding star through the darkest nights. Around them, the city was alive with the vibrant hues of celebration, banners of crimson and gold fluttering in the gentle breeze. "Granada breathes free once more," Zayd observed, the lines of worry that once marked his face now softened by relief. Yahya nodded, his thoughts turning to those who had stood bravely against the tide. we must honor the courage of those who gave everything. Their memory will be the foundation upon which we rebuild. Zaid's eyes met Yaya's, a silent understanding passing between them, and rebuild we shall, with hands of strength and hearts of hope. The city square was a tapestry of joy. The people of Granada gathered to celebrate their deliverance. Yaya took his place before them, the sun casting his shadow long and tall. His voice rang out, clear and true. Today we mark not just a victory of arms, but a triumph of spirit, Yaya proclaimed. Let us lay down the sword and extend the olive branch, for in mercy and understanding we find our truest strength. The crowd erupted in cheers, their spirits soaring as high as the Alhambra's towers against the sky. The olive branch, once a mere emblem on Yaya's arm, had become a symbol of a future built on compassion and solidarity. As the day waned, Yaya sought out Layla, her grace a landmark amidst the sea of celebrants. They found quiet in the gardens of the Alhambra, where fountains whispered tales of love long past. Layla, in the clash of steel and shadow, I have come to understand the power of a gentler bond, Yaya began, his heart in his eyes. With you I see a life not just of duty, but of joy. Layla's smile was like the breaking of dawn, full of warmth and promise. Yahya, you have stood as a warrior and a leader, but it is as the man you are that I give you my heart. In the soft glow of the setting sun, Yahya knelt, his words a vow for the morrow. Will you stand with me, not just in the shadow of war, but in the light of peace? Her answer was a whisper that swept through the garden, a single word that held the weight of worlds. Yes. And so, the chapter closed on a city that had faced the monster at its gates and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger and more united. Granada's streets echoed with songs of victory and whispered promises of love, as Yahya and Layla joined their futures, an embodiment of the enduring peace that would define their days to come. With the sword laid to rest, the olive branch flourished, a symbol of hope for all who sought refuge in the shadow of the Alhambra's ancient walls. The end. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed The Sword and the Olive Branch. Please smash that like button, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily storytelling adventures.